Welcome back to another installment of the Project F100. Today we're going to get the wiring finished up, well, at least as much of the wiring as we can without having our AC in there and like radio, but we can get everything else wired and terminated. So we'll start at the back and we'll rewire those tail lights and do our quick disconnect at the tail end of the frame. Also, probably what'll be maybe somewhat challenging is we're going to go ahead and wire the dash panel. So we'll have fuel gauge, the gauge lighting, high beam indicator, turn signal indicators. What I'm thinking is we add some manual sending units on the engine for the oil pressure and the coolant temp to go in our dash. It'll be kind of redundant from the Holley, but it might be kind of nice to have that manual gauge confirmation of what the vitals look like. The wiring from the frame out to the taillights is all still the original stuff, and to me, it only makes sense to just pull all of this rear tail light wiring out and make a new one on the workbench. So here's a rear tail light insert, and this is all heat shrinked from the factory to this galvanized housing, and this wire insulation is just as brittle as can be. It just cracks as soon as I bend it. Now the wire inside is still, I guess, okay, but it's just not something we really want to risk. Also, you guys know how bad I hate Scotch locks, and it looks like somebody probably did a wiring repair with Scotch locks already up here at this disconnect. This will be the first place that we install one of these quick connects, and it's going to be a 4-wire. We'll do the male side against the truck. The 4 wires, like we showed in our last video, one of them is going to be basically the running lights. The other will be left turn and then right turn, which those also function as the brake signals. And we ran a reverse wire because the tail lights that we're ordering are going to go ahead and have the backup lights put in them. So these trucks up till 66 just had turn signal and brake lights and running lights. And then 67 to 72 is the same lens, but they added a reverse light. So we went ahead and ordered those 67 to 72s. So we're going to wire it accordingly. Alright, now that we've got our last one, probably just make a note of the order that we've put these in, and now we can build the tail light harness to this connector on the workbench. Lucky for us, we had a trailer wiring kit left over from a previous project. This stuff's available at Walmart or most any tractor trailer supply type places, or farm and garden even. So you can keep your wiring color coded to match the way it's supposed to be, kind of a standard wiring color, if that kind of thing enthuses you. One thing we want to keep in mind when we're wiring these is the reverse light signal needs to be split to both sides after this connector. The running light supply wires needs to be split 3 ways, 1 to each tail light and 1 to our tag light. I think they sell these for like 55 bucks. Now I have our harness ran up inside the bottom of the bed. There's plenty of slack wound up in here. And these are ready and waiting for our taillight assemblies to get here. Also, this is for the tag bracket light. And there's slack. I've wound up some extra there too. And then zip tied our connector right here on the top edge of our fuel tank. So that shouldn't go anywhere. I've done some wiring on the back side of this gauge cluster, and I'm going to do my best to not over explain it and waste a bunch of your time. I reused a lot of the factory wiring harness to make this work, and of course everything that comes from the top here is from our Speedway harness. Essentially, you've got like your backlight bulbs, which they all self-ground to the housing. So you have to make sure you run a ground to the housing, and that's what we did from our wiring harness. And from there it splits out and provides a ground side for both of these aftermarket gauge lights, as well as the temp gauge requires a ground independently of its light. Then the power distribution, which it goes through what I originally thought might be a voltage regulator, but it's 12 volts on both sides, so apparently doesn't regulate very much. And from the factory, that went out and provided voltage on each side of these factory gauges, and it provided voltage for these dummy lights or warning bulbs for both the low oil pressure and high coolant temp warnings. So the wire that comes from our fuel sender in the tank just needs to be on one side of this factory gauge and then 12 volts on the other for it to work properly. The left and right turn signals are single feed, as well as the high beam indicator, and again, they ground to the housing. I've ran this number 5 water temp sender wire that comes in the speedway harness out into the engine bay, where we're going to install an analog type coolant temp sensor. I've also ran this new tube out to the engine bay, where we're going to install a fitting for the oil pressure, which runs in here to this aftermarket gauge. I do want to mention, before the purists throw a fit at me, I didn't drill the holes in that factory gauge cluster. They were already there with gauges in place. I've just replaced them with ones that are known good. One thing I found pretty neat was this is the factory tag bracket if you don't have a rear bumper, which makes me think this truck either never had a back bumper or no one ever removed this bracket. The license plate light lens still has the FOMOCO logo on it, and that thing's about 10 times thicker and heavier than what you'll find on any of the newer cars. So I went ahead and just ordered up a few of these ice blue colored LED lights, and we'll use one here for the tag, and we'll probably use the same type of lights inside for the dome light and other courtesy lights under the dash. This is an aluminum adapter that has the 12mm thread on one side that goes in the LS heads, and then takes a 3/8 pipe thread, which is what our temp sensor needs to be, or what it adapts to anyway, to thread into there that will run that wire out from the gauge on the dash. This is a cover for where the factory oil cooler runs, and we had originally put just a block off plate to get our engine started and make sure everything worked. So now we have this one that goes in place and has the 1/8" pipe thread, which is what came with that gauge kit. I'm going to get this gauge cluster installed back in the dash, and then we can start testing our lights again. So let's see how we did. Alright, parking lights. Although dim, those are actually lit up. Now let's turn on our key. Watch this. Fuel gauge will climb oh so slowly, and that is the correct amount of fuel that's in that tank by a visual verification. Let's see, high beams. Yep, that's the indicator light. Turn signals left. And again, they won't flash unless there's a bulb. And here's a pro tip. If they flash rapidly, that tells you that you have a bulb that is out. And if they stay on solid, you have no bulbs at all. And then a normal blinker speed is everything's fine. So left side, right side, check the hazards. And they both come on. You can hear the horn relay clicking, so we know that that's wired correctly and must be grounded. And these gauges, of course, won't work until we fire it up. I'll tell you one thing, the light in this gear shift indicator is extremely bright. You can see it shining against the gauge there. We may have to come up with something to sort of calm that down in the future, but time will tell. I've got that thing rigged up and ready to go. I did get some heat sleeve put around that tube, because if it gets against this exhaust, that would make a mess in a hurry. I'm not sure how big of a mess this is going to be. Oh, but I'm probably going to need that tool. Yeah, it's going to be a mess. Even with an O-ring on this adapter, I still am running thread sealant. Just for a little added security. And our reducer. And the sensor. We can always pull slack back in the cab if we make it a little long, but we can't always make it longer. Well, that's sure written pretty. We'll tie it up a little bit. Maybe it won't stick out like a sore thumb. Our nearly $130 care package from Dennis Carpenter made it in. It's our gaskets for our tail lights, our lenses. The housing comes with the bulbs, with a bullet and this 2-wire connection. Also already has a sealing gasket for the lens. Why did they sell me these? Or maybe why did I buy them? The lens kit, which I checked my order, comes with the gasket, so you kind of don't pay for them separately, but you do. So if it's cheaper to buy just the lenses, if you're going to buy these housings anyway, do that so you don't end up with an extra set of gaskets. What in the heck is this? A poster? Oh, calendar. I guess that's kind of nice. Really all you need to wire up these tail lights are some female bullet connections, and then this 2-wire quick connect. You can buy packages of these at local tractor or equipment supply places. I ordered, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them from Amazon, shockingly. The kit comes with these new pan head screws which hold the housings into the bed. But I'd recommend getting what I call like a star washer. That will assist in grounding this housing to the bed sides themselves, because you don't want to run into a ground issue and that's why your lights don't work. And then you're chasing gremlins. So I just put that in there, and I'll put that washer in, and the pressure between the housing and the bed will allow it to sort of cut in and create a really good ground. Something I did find rather disappointing is we paid over $100 for these housings and lenses, and although I'm really happy that they did come with 2 sets of gaskets, and they already had the bulb, and the wiring harness is pretty nice, and these 2 screws, they didn't give us the screws that hold the lenses to the housing, which those are the ones everyone sees. For this kind of money, it would have been much easier for them to just ship those to me than me having to go find another set. Running lights, turn signal, and reverse lights. I did get the license plate bracket installed, and that ice blue LED tag light Looks really cool. One last thing. Some of you guys might be wondering, how the heck are we going to activate those reverse lights? And this is the answer. This is a low car kit that's actually designed, according to most things, for the Turbo 350 and Turbo 400. But we're going to see if we can't make that work on our 700 R4. Essentially, you just need this ball to be compressed to complete this circuit. So you send 12 volts to one side, and then the other side can go out to the backup light bulbs, and it just complete the circuit and turn those on by mounting one of these brackets to the shift linkage themselves. So when they come around, it'll make contact here at reverse. But that's a project for another video, maybe even its own video. Now that we verified all the tail lights work properly, we're going to go ahead and wire this brake switch. Before we wire it, we might as well confirm that the switch itself works, and we're going to do that by testing continuity between these two contacts when the brake pedal is pressed. That happened. And to keep everything looking so fresh and so clean, we're going to go ahead and put some hockey tape around these two wires and wrap them, and then we'll feed them back in there a little piece. It'll kind of help protect them from getting damaged going through the firewall and hide them from view, just for a nice touch. You should always remove the fuse when you're working on wire connections like that, because you never know what can happen. All right, let's test. We have brakes and brake lights. All that's left now is to verify that we don't spray oil everywhere when we start this thing up, and make sure that this gauge reads accurate oil pressure. Well, here goes nothing. Success. I didn't see any leaks at the bottom or the top of that sending unit hose for the oil pressure gauge, and it seemed to read pretty good. And the Holley, you know what? I didn't even check to see if the Holley agreed with the manual gauge, but I guess we'll have time for that in the future. That wraps up the wiring for now until we get a front end on it for the front turn signals and horn and heat and air inside the cab. I appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you next time.